Alrighty then, welcome back. I hope you guys managed to have a decent break and jot something down that is a little bit meaningful to you guys. I would encourage you guys to post that paragraph you've written to the loop for this subject and perhaps share your ideas with your fellow students. But also in doing that, you might be able to get some other ideas from other individuals that you hadn't thought of before. So to continue on. As I mentioned earlier, the noise that is coming out of your practice, but also the noise around your environment does indeed play a huge factor in terms of the message you're trying to communicate to your client, as does the positioning of your furniture. It's very much encouraged that you do not have a setup where you are sitting across a desk from a client. This, as I mentioned earlier, creates some form of power imbalance. Ideally, you would like to have them perhaps sitting at a 45-degree angle from you, so your chairs are positioned this way, or in some type of circular arrangement, sitting directly across from them, or if you're sitting at a 90-degree angle, these things don't necessarily, or they're not necessarily conducive to the relationship that we're trying to foster. So it is very important where we position ourselves in the room and where we position our clients as well. So that's very much something you guys need to keep in mind when setting up your practice. So let's take a closer look at what nonverbal communication actually is. In terms of what it entails, there's some of the first and foremost things that you will notice are the facial expressions from others, such as whether or not they're frowning, they're smiling, they're crying, or whether they have raised eyebrows. You could imagine asking somebody if they're feeling fine, how are they feeling, and if they're frowning, and have a dull voice and whatnot. And they say, oh yeah, everything's fine. You can tell that's not congruent with the emotions that they're experiencing. And the same thing if somebody's crying, and you ask them, how are they going, and they tell you they're fine. Obviously, that's not congruent as well. Their facial expressions are saying something to you that their words aren't. Similar with eye behaviour as well. If somebody's staring directly at you and does not take away their gaze, this is somewhat an intimidation process, as opposed to frequent eye contact, but also looking away. We're encouraged as practitioners to make eye contact when somebody's speaking to us. However, when we are speaking to others, it's polite for us to look away occasionally. We want to avoid staring in its entirety, so we need to be very well aware of where we are looking. As much as good eye contact is a thing in effective communication processes, staring by all means is the other end of the continuum. It's equally detrimental as keeping your eyes focused on the floor when you're having a conversation with somebody. Obviously conveys a different message, however, it is equally deterring from the message we're trying to give. Paralinguistics is another element. As I mentioned earlier, the example of when somebody's about to cry, you can almost hear the tremor in their voice. So too when people are shy or embarrassed or angry, we can tell that emotional experience they are suffering from the tone of their voice, not necessarily the words that are coming out, but the noise and the tone that message is coming in. If somebody's really nervous, will often hear them talk very, very, very fast, and they don't necessarily stop to take a breath. They just want to get their message out and be done with it. Whereas others who are quite comfortable, they'll say what they need to say, and they'll pause where they need to pause, and they'll make that use of silence for almost a dramatic effect, if you will. But for you guys who are inevitably going to experience silence within the therapeutic relationship, your job is to avoid jumping in to fill what would initially be seen as an awkward silence. There's numerous things could be going on within that silence that we need to allow to happen. Somebody could be contemplating what it was you just said, or somebody could be thinking about what it is that they need to say to you next. So we need to allow that silence, just to allow the individuals involved in the communication process to have that thinking process that they need to carry on. Also, the use of time is very much a non-verbal communication message. If I'm jumping in over you and not allowing you to finish your conversation, that highlights some essence of me not necessarily paying all that close attention to you. There's some type of listening block that I have, that I'm assuming that I have all the information I need from you before you've even finished what you're talking about. And like I just said, if you're rushed in terms of your dialogue, there's a nervousness about you, or if you're slow to respond, if you go beyond the silence, or the acceptable silence period, there's highly likely some type of emotional element behind that slowness to respond, and these things are to be inferred and interpreted as practitioners. It's at our discretion to interpret these things. For example, if I ask you about your relationship with your mother, and you're very slow to respond to that, as opposed to if I ask your relationship with your brother, and you turn around immediately and say, oh yeah, that's fine, that's good, we're great, we're pals, blah blah blah. But then if I want to talk to you about your mother, and you don't necessarily respond straight away, I can tell that there's somewhat of a different relationship element that you have with your mother. There's perhaps something you don't necessarily want to discuss entirely. And also the physical presence that we give off. Obviously, our gender and our race, the colour of our skin, the way we do our hair, how we keep ourselves, all these things contribute to verbal communication. You could just imagine walking into a complementary practitioner's office who is, slovenly looking, food dripping from their chin, Macca's, Cokes and chip packets on their desk, these types of elements, not necessarily brushed hair, perhaps a little bit odorous. You could see, as a client coming into that practitioner's office, there is going to be very little trust and want to develop a relationship with this individual who is basically contravening their own modality. So as you can see, these all add up. It's not common for anyone to walk down a busy city street and see a homeless individual dressed in a three-piece suit and looking fine and dandy. Most homeless people are recognised by the shabbiness of their clothes and their look, and you could almost spot out or point out without question a lot of the homeless individuals based on their appearance. So using that as an example, it's very easy, I guess, to make assumptions about people on top of the actual communication that is being portrayed as well. So these are very important things for us guys to know. But yes, the way we appear and the way we present ourselves in therapy or in practice does go a long way to giving individuals messages about us and how we perceive ourselves also. But that's something that you guys could also perceive from your clients as well. How they present to you will give you a very good indication of the type of person that they think themselves as, which goes a long way to understanding their issues in itself. The facial expressions. We're going to take a closer look at some of the facial expressions. One of my favourite non-verbal gestures to see is the incongruency between somebody who's agreeing with something but doesn't really want to. It's often that you will see, and watch what I do with my head here. It's often that you will see somebody agree totally. Yeah, I totally want to do that. I totally am going to do that. They'll agree verbally. You can see their non-verbal behaviour is like, no, I don't think so. I don't think so. So these things go a long way to communicating messages to therapists who are perceptive enough to pick these things up. as much as a smile, or as much as a cheeky grin or a raise of the eyebrows, all these things do come into play in highlighting to us what is going on through somebody's head. Um, you as does the lack of facial expression. If somebody presents with a very much, I'm going to use the term monotoned, even though that is an auditory descriptive. For somebody to have a monotoned face, they would lack the emotion. They would they would lack any type of movement that would highlight the emotion that they would be experiencing. So that in itself is also an element to look into. If you say something that is funny, or that you would expect somebody to smile at and they don't, then that tells you something about that individual. Also, you get a message from that, as much as as much as the message you would get if they did laugh at that thing that you expected people to smile at. So all these things, they do reveal a message that we need to accept as practitioners, or not necessarily accept, but be aware of at the least, in order to interpret and then shape what we come back with in terms of the dialogue continuing. Um, as you can see, there are 6 facial expressions on your screen now, and these are basically the 6 common emotions that have been highlighted as pan-cultural. These are very much a human trait, not necessarily a geographical trait or a cultural specific trait. These are human emotions, and I can assure you that that individual at the bottom in the middle is not Jim Carrey, despite the resemblance. And as you can see, we have a look of anger, we have a look of disgust, we have a look of surprise, we have a look of happiness and sadness, and shock and awe. So these are basically the 6 basic emotions that you will notice, and probably have noticed. And it's not very often that these looks are mistaken. Even 6-year-old children are able to pick out what emotion somebody's experiencing by the look on their face. Numerous experiments have been done across cultures to figure out these 6 basic emotions. So you can see that if you said something to somebody and you got any one of the looks that you're seeing right now, you would be able to, without words, get a very good indication of how that individual is reacting to that message. As much as your facial expressions are going to pass on a message to your client as well. For example, if somebody was to come in and to perhaps reveal some sort of rash that they had, that they were looking for some sort of treatment from you, and you know you made that type of movement and facial expression, but out of your mouth were words that were incongruent with your emotional experience. For example, oh yeah, like if you were to, oh yeah, I can fix that. That doesn't bother me at all. Like there would be some sort of incongruency between your facial expressions, your body movements, and your verbal dialogue. So we need to be very aware as practitioners that our facial expressions, as much as they are innate, if somebody makes us angry, or if we stub our toe, we instinctively go non-verbally to a facial expression, and we need to be very aware of these in practice, to highlight to our clients the congruency between our facial expressions and our verbal dialogue. These go a long way to building that therapeutic alliance and the rapport that is necessary for us. Can you guys pick which emotion belongs to which facial expression? It's always a good trick to be able to understand these elements. Our eye behaviour, as we mentioned earlier, eye contact is, well, not necessarily eye contact per se, but what we do with our eyes very much highlights what it is that we are thinking, or what it is that how we are feeling about what it is that has just been said. And, and I like to use the example, if you say something to somebody and they do this, with their eyes, there's a message there to be taken. So our eye behaviour is very much a very important element communication process. If we stare, we give across a message of dominance and power. If we're unable to maintain eye contact, we give a message of a lack of interest or some sort of fear or nervousness. But also, in saying that, we need to be very aware that eye contact is not necessarily a pan-cultural communication element. These things do differ within cultures. I know that with Indigenous Australians, that making direct eye contact as you're asking a direct question is very much offensive to that culture. So, these are things that we need to keep in mind also. I do like the quote that we get from Paul Collier, in that the eyes are in fact the mirror of the soul, or the window to the soul, if you will, and they reflect everything that seems to be hidden. And I know from my personal experiences that you can kind of see into somebody, whether it's their soul or whether it's their brain or whether it's just their inner being that you're looking at. The more perceptive or the more competent you are as an individual with the communication process, the more you're able to see the messages in people's eyes, or see into them as a process, which can be very, very helpful. Excuse me. Yes, pay very close attention to some of the eye movements within your social circles of how people portray messages. Your social circles are very good places to practice your understanding of eye behaviour, as well as monitoring your own eye behaviour as well. You'll find that we often do things that we're very much not aware of in terms of where our eyes travel as we're in conversation. I often find in a social circle that people are looking you up and down while they're having a conversation with you. You've probably been familiar, if not experienced it yourself. For example, if you were in a club and you were having a drink and an attractive young lady came over and she was making conversation with you, and if your eyes happen to drop below the neckline, you would often get the "Hey, eyes are up here, pal" type of response. So as much as you probably unintentionally wanted to drift that way with your eyes, and you wanted to maintain eye contact to just mutually converse, some of us, we can't necessarily help our eye behaviour per se. So it's a very good means of understanding eye behaviour is to pay closer attention to your social circles and your own self in dialogue, so you can perfect it by the time you do get into practice. Paralinguistics. This is basically not necessarily the things we say, but it's how we say it. I remember my older brother growing up at home, he would always get in trouble for the things he would say to our mother. And it was never necessarily what he was saying, it was the way he said it, and you would always hear out of her mouth, it was almost a broken record. It's not what you're saying, it's the way you're saying it element. And he could never understand that it's the words that he was saying weren't necessarily that offensive. The tone and the delivery of those words is what was offending, and that's why he would always get in trouble. But as you can see on the board there, on the screen, should I say, that the tone and the delivery of our words, it can change the meaning of our statements. If we put the inflection in the wrong place, or if we don't use the right words, or if we raise our voices at the wrong time, this can all give off certain messages. And as you can see on the board, especially with articulation, if you are able to use words that are very concise in terms of your meaning, it does highlight a sense of knowledge and wisdom, as well as confidence. However, if you are to use lay terms in conversation where you might be expected to use academic terms, it does highlight a form of knowledge lacking, perhaps even shy as well. And obviously accents are very very key element of paralinguistics. Some of us can't understand certain, especially thick accents. If you've ever spoken to a Scottish individual or a Canadian or an American individual, these people have very thick accents, and it's often you can't understand those individuals, and you have to re-ask what it was that they just said in order to confirm your understanding. So we need to be very well aware of those elements of the communication process also. On that note, you guys should take another break and go and get yourself a drink of water, and we'll come back and we will finish off the remainder of the lecture.